Get out of my store. David's voice thundered like a judge delivering a final sentence, his chest rising and falling with the weight of his arrogance. He jabbed his finger toward the glass doors, not just pointing but banishing, as though he were some king casting out an unworthy subject. His eyes blazed with self-importance. Scanning the woman in front of him, as if she were beneath the marble floor, he strutted on. Customers froze in mid-step. Conversations dissolved into silence, and the humming buzz of electronics faded under the raw tension that now filled every corner of the store. A slap cracked through the air like a gunshot, echoing off crystal displays and polished counters. Gasps erupted. Some people shielded their mouths, others reached for their phones. The scene was no longer just confrontation. It was spectacle. David Thompson, the 45-year-old store manager who treated this flagship location like his private kingdom, had done the unthinkable. His hand had just struck across the face of a woman who seemed ordinary. Hoodie, faded jeans, sneakers that looked like they had walked too many miles. But ordinary was the last word anyone would use once the truth was revealed. Samantha Williams stumbled back, steadying herself with one hand while the other pressed against her cheek, her palm feeling the sting, her soul igniting with fire. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. Her voice slipped out calm, sharp, almost surgical. Your store? 2 words. That was all it took. They hovered in the air, a storm waiting to break, and already customers knew something deeper was unfolding. Phones tilted, recording, immortalizing the moment that would be replayed across millions of screens. David smirked, proud of his dominance, unaware that in just minutes his career, his reputation, and the life he had built on cruelty would collapse. The countdown to his downfall had begun, and every person watching would witness a lesson in justice they would never forget. 5 minutes earlier, no one in that sleek electronics paradise could have imagined what was about to unfold. A glossy black Tesla had glided to the curb outside the Techlux flagship store, its windows tinted like secrets waiting to be revealed. The door opened, and out stepped a woman who blended effortlessly into the stream of passersby. A gray hoodie cloaked her frame, her jeans were faded at the knees, and her sneakers carried the quiet wear of countless days. She tugged the hood a little lower over her perfectly styled hair, instantly transforming from executive power to invisibility. To every stranger's eye, she was just another shopper, maybe even someone who didn't belong in a store that gleamed like a palace to technology. But the truth beneath the hoodie was extraordinary. This wasn't a random customer. This was Samantha Williams, the founder, the visionary, the CEO of Techlux. 20 years ago, she'd been a foster kid bouncing from house to house, clinging to dreams bigger than her circumstances. At 16, she'd worked 3 jobs, flipping burgers at dawn, stacking shelves by afternoon, and cleaning offices at night. She saved every penny, pored over borrowed business books, and plotted a future that seemed impossible. With $1,200 and a relentless vision, she built Techlux from a garage startup into a $50 million empire. Yet today, she wasn't walking into this store to be celebrated as a business titan. She was undercover, her disguise chosen deliberately to reveal truths she couldn't uncover from boardroom reports. Whispers had reached her about discriminatory behavior in this very store. Customers profiled by race, appearance, or perceived wealth. Samantha had to know if her company's values had been betrayed. As she pushed open the glass doors, pride mixed with dread. Chandeliers sparkled overhead, reflecting off tablets and laptops displayed like crown jewels. Shoppers in designer suits strolled the aisles, their watches and handbags gleaming. Samantha's hoodie made her stand out instantly, but that was the point. She wasn't here to be admired. She was here to test the culture she had built, and she was about to discover more than she bargained for. From the moment Samantha stepped inside, she felt the shift. It wasn't subtle. Eyes followed her, not with curiosity, but with suspicion. The security guard at the entrance fixed his gaze on her like a hawk circling prey. His posture stiffened, his jaw tightened, and though he didn't move, his stare traveled with her every step. Samantha's chest tightened, not from fear, but from recognition. She had seen this scene play out too many times in her life, back when she was a teenager trying to buy school supplies, or a college student struggling to be taken seriously in stores that measure customers by clothes, not character. Some things never changed. She drifted toward the premium smartphone display, her fingers grazing the glass case housing devices priced higher than some people's monthly rent. That's when she heard it, the voice of David Thompson, the store manager. His words cut through the soft background music like shards of glass. "You have to know how to read certain types of customers," he told Jennifer, the young assistant manager, standing nervously at his side. His tone was slick, polished, dripping with condescension. "Some people are real buyers, others are just, well, you know." Jennifer shifted uncomfortably, her lips pressed tight, her eyes darting toward the floor. She didn't answer, but her silence spoke volumes. Samantha's stomach turned. This wasn't rumor. This wasn't exaggeration. It was prejudice playing out in real time inside her store. She moved closer, pretending to browse, listening as David strutted across the floor like a self-appointed king. His suit was sharp, his smile fake, his arrogance as thick as the polished marble beneath his shoes. He had no idea who was listening, no idea that the hoodie-clad woman standing inches away was the very person who could rewrite his future with a single decision. Samantha inhaled deeply, steadying herself. She hadn't come to pick a fight. She had come to observe. But fate had other plans. Because in less than 10 minutes, David would prove everything she feared, and more, in front of an audience armed with phones, outrage, and the unstoppable power of social media. Samantha stood quietly, blending into the background as she watched David operate. The moment a man in a tailored suit stepped through the doors, David's entire demeanor shifted. His back straightened, his smile stretched wide, and he strode forward like he was greeting royalty. "Welcome to Techlux, sir," David said, his voice warm with false charm. "You look like a man who appreciates quality. Let me show you our exclusive collection." The words dripped with rehearsed flattery. The suited man chuckled politely, accepting the attention. Meanwhile, Samantha waited patiently by the smartphone display, ignored like an inconvenient shadow. She cleared her throat softly, just enough to signal she was ready for assistance. David didn't even glance her way. Instead, he continued showering compliments on his new customer, his voice rising so others could hear just how important this man was. Samantha's jaw tightened, but she stayed calm. When the suited customer finally walked off with a brochure, Samantha tried again. "Excuse me," she said, her voice measured. "Could you tell me more about this model?" Her hand hovered over the flagship phone in the case. David turned at last, his eyes scanning her hoodie, her jeans, her sneakers. His expression shifted instantly. Polite mask gone, replaced by disdain. "Oh, that one," he said dismissively, his tone flat. "You might want to try the pawn shop down the street. They've got phones more in your range." The insult landed sharp and public. Conversations around them faltered. A well-dressed woman nearby frowned. An older gentleman in an expensive coat shook his head in disapproval. David, oblivious or uncaring, straightened his tie with pride. He thought he had scored a clever line, that he had put a nobody in her place. But Samantha didn't flinch. Her eyes narrowed slightly, but her voice stayed even, calm as stone. "Interesting suggestion," she replied. Customers were beginning to notice. Phones tilted discreetly. The energy in the store was shifting, building like a storm waiting to break. And Samantha knew she didn't need to provoke anything further. David's arrogance would do the work for her. Marcus Rivera, the young sales associate, had been watching the exchange from across the aisle. His face burned with embarrassment for his manager's behavior. He wasn't new to David's arrogance. He had seen it before, but this felt different. This was blatant, cruel, and loud enough for every customer to hear. Marcus started toward Samantha, determined to help, but David's sharp voice cut through the air like a whip. "Don't waste your time on window shoppers," he hissed, low enough to seem private, yet loud enough for Samantha to catch every syllable. "Focus on real customers." The words hit Marcus like a punch. He froze, torn between following orders and following his conscience. Around them, The atmosphere shifted again. A businesswoman holding a designer purse exchanged a look with her friend, both shaking their heads. An elderly couple nearby whispered, clearly unsettled. Even the security guard at the entrance, who had been suspicious of Samantha from the moment she walked in, shifted uncomfortably. Samantha remained composed, her face a mask of quiet strength. She had built an empire on patience and strategy, and she knew better than to lash out now. Still, inside her, something coiled tight. Anger, disappointment, and determination blending into a steel resolve. She pretended to browse further, testing the waters. Each time she approached an item of value, David's dismissive comments followed like poison. When she lingered near the premium laptops, his lips curled into a smirk. "Ma'am, those start at $3,000. The library has free internet if you just need to check your EMI." A hush fell over the section. Customers stopped pretending to shop. This was no longer poor service, it was public humiliation. But Samantha didn't back down. Slowly, deliberately, she reached in her hoodie pocket. Out came a sleek, black card that gleamed under the store lights. An American Express Centurion. The kind of card only the wealthy, the powerful, the elite carried. David's eyes locked onto it, disbelief flickering across his face. His smirk faltered, if only for heartbeat. But then arrogance reclaimed him, and his words sealed his fate. "This better not be stolen." David snatched the card from Samantha's hand with the flourish of a man convinced he had caught a thief. He held it up like evidence, his lips curling into a sneer. "I'll need 3 forms of ID, he announced, his voice loud enough for the entire store to hear. "And I'll be calling the bank to make sure this is legitimate." His words dripped with suspicion, not policy. Customers stiffened. Sarah Chun, a successful entrepreneur dressed in a suit sharp enough to rival David's own, froze where she stood. She had just purchased a laptop minutes earlier, and David hadn't asked her for a single piece of ID. She shook her head in disbelief, whispering to her friend, "This is discrimination, plain and simple." Jennifer, the assistant manager, shifted behind the counter, her hands fidgeting nervously. She knew David was out of line. This wasn't standard procedure. But fear of losing her job kept her silent. Samantha, however, didn't raise her voice. She calmly retrieved the card from David's hand, her expression unreadable. Then she slipped her phone from her pocket and dialed a number with steady fingers. Her voice was soft but firm. "Robert, pull the employment files for the downtown store staff." "Yes, all of them. And come down here immediately." David chuckled, mistaking her composure for weakness. "Calling your crew?" he said mockingly, raising his voice once more to make sure bystanders heard. "Let me guess, you're planning to cause a scene." "Well, I've got security cameras and police on speed dial." He puffed out his chest, convinced he had neutralized a problem customer. But the audience wasn't buying it. Sarah's face showed outrage. The elderly couple near the tablets muttered about leaving reviews. Even the security guard looked uneasy, as though questioning whose side he was supposed to be on. Marcus, meanwhile, could take no more. He stepped forward, eyes burning with conviction. "I'm sorry about this," he told Samantha quietly, but loud enough for others to hear. "Everyone deserves respect, regardless of how they look. This isn't right." His words trembled with risk. He knew his job hung in the balance. Yet in that moment, he chose integrity over silence. David's head snapped toward Marcus, his eyes narrowing into slits. "Excuse me," he barked, his voice dripping with venom. "Did you just undermine me in my store?" Marcus held his ground, though his hands trembled slightly at his sides. "I said," he repeated, voice stronger now, "everyone deserves respect. This woman hasn't done anything wrong." The store grew eerily quiet. Customers leaned in, phones angled to capture every second. For the first time, the attention shifted away from David's theatrics and onto the young associate daring to stand up against him. David's lips curled into a snarl. His authority was being challenged, and his ego couldn't tolerate it. "You're fired," he roared, his fingers stabbing the air like a weapon. The word cracked through the silence, sharp and final. Marcus flinched but didn't back down. His eyes flickered toward Samantha, apology written all over his face. But Samantha saw more than apology. She saw courage. She saw the kind of integrity that money couldn't buy and training couldn't instill. The kind of character that could change a company. Customers gasped, some audibly protesting. Fired? For that, a woman's voice called from the back. David ignored it, basking in what he thought was victory. His chest rose with self-satisfaction, mistaking cruelty for strength. But he was blind to the cameras, blind to the eyes capturing his every word, every sneer, every unjust act. Samantha's phone buzzed again in her pocket, but she let it ring. Her attention was fixed on David, whose rage was spiraling faster than he realized. The moment he fired Marcus, the balance of power in the room shifted. Customers were no longer silent observers. They were witnesses, participants, and soon-to-be amplifiers of truth. And David, blinded by arrogance, was digging his own grave deeper with each word. Samantha remained calm, but inside, her resolve sharpened. This was no longer just about testing store culture. This was about exposing the rod at its core. She lifted her chin, her eyes locked on David, waiting to see just how far he would fall before the truth crushed him.